And South Africa's new government marked its 100th day in power on Sunday, and while the coalition has been credited with lifting market sentiment, it's arguably President Ramaphosa's earlier reforms that are driving the current optimism. Some analysts say the formation of South Africa's business-friendly coalition government has triggered a wave of investment announcement and positive sentiment not seen in years, spurring hope that Africa's biggest economy may finally be finding its footing after a lost decade and a half. One of the notable achievements is the mass power outages that had plagued the country since 2008. The rand has also rallied since the government's formation, the benchmark stock index hitting a record. And to talk about this, political analyst, Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast joins me to unpack this. Good afternoon from here. Glad to have you join me on the news.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, let me start by asking, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the GNU's performance in its first 100 days based on its ability to deliver on campaign promises and also address key challenges?
I think it's still early days. It's quite difficult for me to quantify it, on a scale of 1 to 10. Suffice to say, I think it's still early days. When you were setting the scene, you spoke about how the market forces have found comfort in the GNU, which is true. Actually, I would argue and say the GNU is a brainchild of the market forces, largely because the idea was born in the beginning out of a plan that was introduced by the Democratic Alliance, which is the historically official opposition. So they came up with a plan of what they call a moonshot pact, that opposition parties must work side by side, which culminated into the multi-party charter. But that idea fell short in terms of taking off the ground because they did not garner enough votes to constitute government. Then the market forces sponsored an idea of the ANC and the DA joining forces. Now, the ANC has found it very difficult to sell this idea to its members and opted to use the concept of government of national unity as opposed to a coalition in order to circumvent a criticism. Yes, you are right. I mean, we have not had power outages since, I think, the past 6 months, if I'm not mistaken, or more than that. We have not had other problems that we have had before, but we still have a slow pace of service delivery. I know that last week there was a cut of interest rates, which is good, meaning that at least the consumers can cool off in terms of paying interest. But I think that was necessitated by what is happening internationally in terms of the cut of interest rates in the US.
Well, I hear you when you say that it's still early days, but I'm not sure critics will agree with you on that. But then let's talk about what we saw recently about the GNU being shaken a bit when the president signed the BELA bill. I mean, do you foresee same in future? And if you do, what's your take on the standing of both DA, Democratic Alliance, as well as ANC in this coalition?
Just to be fair and square, I think, in my view, that is no big deal. That tension that exists between the DA and the ANC because of the BELA bill. Because where there are human beings, there are problems. Conflict is a natural phenomenon. And I like what they did because they have identified a way out, which is to institute a new forum now for conflict management, which was not there in the beginning, so that when there are disagreements, the government does not fall apart. And that doesn't mean that I'm in support or I'm not in support of the current administration. Now, the president, under normal circumstances, he would have signed that bill by himself without, consulting opposition parties, so long as it has gone through the legislative institute. So what he has done in terms of the BELA bill, he has put on hold some sections of the bill which are controversial in terms of the language policy. so that there could be wider consultation. But I think both the ANC, in the main, those are the main players in the GNU. They understand that in order for the government to flourish, they have to compromise on some of the policy issues.
Okay, let's talk a bit about foreign policy now. Let's shift gears to that. So far, what has been the impact of the GNU's international relations on the country's foreign policy, trade, and of course, security?
Yeah, that is a very important question, because there has not been a clear articulation of late since the inception of the GNU in terms of what government stands for, in terms of its outlook. Yes, I mean, when the president made his speech during the State of the Nation address, he was very abstract in terms of what government stands for, in terms of the culture of human rights, multilateralism, promoting democracy, development, the restructuring of the UN, and so on. But I'm sure you're well aware that the DA and the ANC, they don't see eye to eye with regard to the war that is underway between Hamas and Israel, and also the conflict that is at play at the moment in the Middle East between Hezbollah in Lebanon and Israel. The DA tends to gravitate to the global north and to the US as opposed to the global south. But I don't think that they've had disagreements in public in that regard. But historically, they don't see eye to eye, because the ANC is a liberation movement. It has always aligned itself with, I would say, progressive forces, and the DA has always aligned itself with countries like the US and other countries of the global north.
Well, we'll continue to keep in touch with you to see how politics takes shape in South Africa. But thank you so much for your time on the news. Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast, and that's a political analyst. Many thanks indeed for your insights.